everybody, it's Jen. We are working to try to get this triumph from trauma to triumph with my friend Morgan, and we are having all kinds of technical difficulties. I can't even talk this morning. So we're having all kinds of difficulties getting everything loaded. So we are going to try coming live on Facebook. She should be coming on live here in just a minute. We had an event set up, and so if you did register for that, just know we're going to just do it here. So I'm waiting for her to come on live. So Morgan, as soon as you come on, it should say that you're watching my live, and then it should give me the option to bring you on. So with any luck, I'm going to try to, I don't know if I can share this in the event. Okay, it says you're here, so why is it not? Let's see, bring on Morgan. It's not showing that you're viewing, and I see you're right there. So weird. Do you know if you're on a format that allows live? Like, you have to either be on Google Chrome or on your phone. It will not work if you're doing it from like a Mac. So if you can let me know what platform you're on, that will make a big difference. You're on Google Chrome. Okay, so you should be able to add, but it is not letting me bring you on. I wonder why. I'm getting all kinds of options of people to add. Janita, we could go live because I can't add. Okay, there we go. Yay! I don't know what you did, Morgan, but it's working. Let's see if it's working now. It says it's adding. It's saying it's adding. It's connecting. We're almost there. Yay! So I just realized I don't have my headphones on. Oh my gosh. I wonder if anybody could hear me on that. That was probably ridiculous.
Sorry, everyone.
That's okay. Okay, can everybody can hear us now? Can I get a thumbs up? Yes, we got it going. Are we good? Okay. Yeah, so we're getting help. They're like, you have to either do it on an iPhone or an iPad. You can't do it. You have to do it on Chrome. I know on my Mac, I have to go on Chrome. I can't be on Safari to make the live happen. So
I learn something new every day.
Oh man, I'm telling you, it's constantly, this technical stuff is not my strong suit at all. So it's really funny, but I'm going to go over and share it to my page too, just because we were going to try to do this in an actual Zoom link, and we were having technical issues this morning. So I'm going to go live with Morgan, and we will go ahead and start talking about all about you and all about what you're doing. And we were talking about today from trauma to triumph. Is that right? Is that, I have the title right? Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So you guys know, I'm just going to do a really quick, you guys know that I'm not real big on like formal introduction. I know some people are like, oh, we need all the history and we need to know like her resume. And I'm like, you can find out all of that stuff by looking up her website. So what you need to know is I love to be bringing, in people who have really valuable things to tell us and to teach us and all of those kind of things. We're seeing your ceiling there, sweetheart.
I know. I'm so sorry. I didn't know we had to switch my phone.
It's
so
okay.
It didn't have enough charge, so I had to plug it in.
Plug it in. It's okay. That's
real life.
Technology. It's all real and authentic. What's so funny is on my membership group this morning, we were talking about this. We were talking about the difference in perception and discernment and authenticity. And I'm like, that's the one thing. I had a gal tell me one time that I was teaching actually a meditation class. So I didn't dress up because it's like yoga pants and stuff, even though we were doing it online, like I was in my yoga stuff because it was a meditation class. And she didn't think I looked professional. And I'm like, I'm teaching breathing. It doesn't really matter what clothes I'm wearing. And so we were talking about authenticity today. And I'm like, that's the thing is like, just like what we're going to talk about today, like I want people to know that it's real life and it's authentic and you really still can have the life that you love. You've got to decide what that is, right? You've got to decide what the life you love is. So that being said, I'm super excited to have you as a guest. This isn't the platform we usually do these kind of workshops on, but we're going to go with it anyway. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about this whole topic of trauma to triumph. And it's kind of your own story, right?
It is. And, going with authenticity and finding your own way, I want to preface it that there is no one way really to heal trauma. And everything that I'm going to be sharing is my journey and how I've healed. And it is how I support others to heal. But it's certainly not the only way, it's just one way. And what's really funny is some of my trauma actually happened in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
So as I was reflecting on our call this morning, I was like, it's really come full circle.
That you've got it.
It's really interesting how that
Yeah.
happened.
Very, very good. So
Yeah.
I'm going to just let you kind of get into it because we've already, our time already has been cut into this morning because we were planning on going live. It's been about 20 minutes that we've been trying to get this going. So let's just go ahead and let's just jump right into the good stuff. And let's just go into kind of your journey and what you can share with everybody. And then I'm going to make sure to get this uploaded later because normally these workshops go into YouTube and then that way they can find all about you. And if you're offering a program or coaching or whatever you offer, they'll find out all that good juicy stuff after. So let's just get into the meat of it and let's just dive in.
That sounds good.
Good.
Well, the first thing, like the first step that I realized that I had to arrive on was really that point of surrender. I think we often want to escape the pain.
Oh,
yeah. And it's natural, right? Like, I can't blame any of us, but until we can arrive at that point of surrendering to the experience actually having happen instead of going through, like, we have to move through that phase where our brain's like, if only I'd done this, kind of the denial or the looking back and thinking if I could have done this differently, I could have prevented it from happening. Once we move that past that phase, we have to move into acceptance, and that's really where we can find our power. And surrender is something I find people really often identify with, being weak or accepting that it happened in a disempowering way. But when we surrender to the experience happening, it moves us into a powerful place because we're no longer struggling, in that power place of wishing that it didn't happen and trying to escape that it happened and trying to escape the emotions or the repercussions of the thing, whatever it may be, happened. And, that being said, with trauma, I want to acknowledge that there's all kinds of types of trauma. So just because it may not be what someone would look at and think of as a major trauma versus a minor trauma, it doesn't mean that you still don't have to move through the phases.
Right.
Even with minor things, I think people, we tend to want to push it down and be like, oh, that was just a little thing. But, like I've had clients that have been in fender bender car accidents. Well, it created a trauma. Now every time they drive past that point on the road, they have that traumatic experience. So, big or small, there is no, I don't want to say better trauma, but all traumas are valid.
Right.
And all are equally important to have to move through and heal.
So can I add on a couple things there, what you're talking about? I really feel like the thing about surrender is people feel that it's weakness. And I think you kind of said that too, but I want to reiterate that. Like, the funny thing is there's nothing weak about surrender. It is one of the hardest things you'll ever have to do, is to actually be in a place where you're like, okay, you know what? This is how it is. Like, now what do I do? Yeah. How do I get out of this? Because the only way you can really move into that space of being ready to heal is in that full surrender of this is exactly what it is and exactly what's going on. And the other thing about that is trauma creates emotions, and emotions do physically lodge into our bodies. We hold on to that. So if you're not allowing yourself to feel emotions and feel all the feels, like my son always says, feel the feels, Mom.
So, yeah, you really have to feel it to heal it.
Yeah, yeah.
Do we have time for me to go into an example?
Yeah.
Okay. So in my own experience, I think an example I can offer of surrender is, so one of the traumas that I went through was being in a domestic relationship. it was a physically abusive relationship, and but there were many opportunities. Finally, the last opportunity, I chose to press charges. And so that, just to kind of give the severity of the incident, it was that severe physical things that, even though I did not want to press charges, it was the only choice that I saw was actually healthy for everyone involved. And so when we talk about surrender, I mean, I consider myself a really strong, intelligent woman. The last place I wanted to be in was the place where I was a woman that had been beaten, and had to press charges. So there was actually a many-year time span where I just pushed it down and I just wanted to deny it. But that moment that I owned my experience and I stopped denying it and said, okay, yes, I am this woman, and I am also this woman that had this experience. And I'm going to own it, and I'm going to surrender it to it, and I'm going to feel those feelings, the feelings I talked about, like of being ashamed, of, wishing that, thinking that I was dumb for having not seen the signs, all of the thoughts and feelings that came along with it. When I stopped and surrendered and just said, okay, this happened, I had a part in it, and surrendered to it, I took my power back. I no longer had to run from, any of that I just mentioned. And so I hope that can kind of paint a concrete, real life example of what I mean by surrender. Did that make sense?
It does. I think anytime that you own it, right? So the other thing that I think I want to add to that is that's a very, very personal experience to you. The other thing I think, sometimes I think trauma, because that's an obvious, like that was definitely a trauma situation, right? Like that's an actual definite,
it's one type of
trauma, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing is, like, what I was thinking when you were talking about that in the beginning was the latest trauma that I went through was when my mm-hmm. daughter was in the hospital. And, so it's a different kind of trauma because it wasn't happening to me. I was still a part of it. And the same thing, you're trying to be strong. So you're trying to push through and you're trying to do all these things. I didn't realize how much emotional trauma I had locked in. And the only reason I wasn't realizing it is because I was trying so hard to be strong. And I was so focused on just working on getting her healthy and doing what needed to be done. But when it finally all settled, that's when I realized, oh my God, I'm still holding on to this, because I had to go to the hospital with my sister-in-law who has cancer, and I had a meltdown. Not because of and it was weird because I called my husband and I'm like, I know I'm here with Carrie, but all I can think about is Allie. Like, all I could think about in that moment was being in the hospital with my daughter. So that was a sign for me there that I was still holding trauma. So I think it can be
a beautiful example of another experience.
So I think that
how it shows up.
Yeah, and how it can show up in all kinds of different ways. And just like you were saying, a fender bender, like it may not bother you in that moment. You may have the adrenaline to push through and you're fine. And you may be driving for months or two. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I'm freaking out. Why am I freaking out? Well, that trauma from the fender bender, which didn't seem like a big deal, is showing up. So whatever it is and however it's showing up for you, just honor it. But the key point I think you're trying to make is no matter what it is, you have to own it. You have to take ownership of it in order to heal it.
And move past that point. Like, you illustrate it really beautifully in your experience, in your example, how you found out that you were trying to push it down to be strong, which we have to do sometimes to keep going.
Yeah, like, and I needed to in that moment. Yeah.
Right. Totally valid, survival thing we have to do. But then that moment came where you had to stop and surrender and unpack it. And I think, what happens if we don't take that time when we get re-triggered, which is what it sounded like.
Yes.
The other incident when you're in the hospital, it brought up all those other feelings, which you then have to unpack.
Right. Yep.
And that's what happens when we don't, process our emotions, is something else that has a similar, we'll call it frequency or feeling, comes up. And it triggers all these other things that have that same feeling.
And I think it's important too for people to not measure it, right? Because just like you were saying
Yeah,
earlier, it's like, well, it's not a very big trauma, but it's a big trauma. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter how big
it
or
doesn't.
small. It's whether or not it's there. If it sticks into
Exactly.
you, it doesn't matter how big or small it is. Like, you've got to unpack it, just like you were saying. So, and
Yeah.
really quick, I want to say hi to everybody. There's a lot of people that are watching and like waving and stuff. And I'm so grateful that you guys are here. So as we're going through this, let me know if you have questions. We're going to try to stay on track more like a webinar style, but I do want feedback and questions since we're live. So that being said, not to interrupt you, but we'll go back to that now. I hope I didn't get you too off track. I saw you have a paper, so hopefully we can get right back on track.
Yeah, I made our bullet points right here.
Good, good.
The sec just touching on that, like before we move to the next point, I want to reiterate what you said in a different way, and it's that any size trauma still has a similar physical response.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter what the event, we still have a mental, physical, and emotional response and reprogramming that we have to work through. So, when people, if you find yourself saying, oh, well, it's just this, it's just that, remind yourself that no matter what the event or experience, it still has a similar response.
Right.
And so it's all okay. It's all normal. It's a response. And we have to support ourselves to move through it. And the next topic there is, I find a method that works for me is to really create an empowering story around an experience. And for me, I have to get everything out on paper and out of my head. So the second topic is really to choose an empowering story around your experience, one that supports you to feel good and to take those emotions from a heavy place to a more uplifted place. And I find that I have to get out of my head and on paper. There's many ways you can do that. If a person is auditory, they can make a recording of themselves talking and then listen to the story and ask themselves, like, how could you tell that story in a different way that would make you feel better about the event and about yourself? And it's not that we try to make the event right or wrong or resolved. We just want to change it, how we talk about it, so that when we move forward, it doesn't create, it doesn't dig at our wound.
Right. So reframing it basically is what you're talking about.
It really is reframing it. It's like in my example, going from, feeling bad about myself for having been in that experience to creating a new story for myself, which was, for me, I looked at all the things I learned from the experience. I learned how strong I am, for example. And so, there's Joseph Campbell, he has the Hero's Storybook, and we all go through challenges in our life. But how can you write your own story and reframe it, like you mentioned, in a way that you paint yourself out to be the hero of their story instead of the victim?
Yeah. So, like,
even if you get hurt.
Yeah. So to make it more simple, instead of saying I'm a victim of domestic abuse, you can say I have been through experiences that have made me become the strong woman that I am today.
Exactly. And for me, I use, just like you said, experiences. Because when we're rewriting our story, for my own healing journey, and what I try to help my clients with is, I think it's disempowering for us to identify with our experiences unless they empower you and are uplifting. But to say I am the victim of, or to me even I am the survivor of, makes an experience part of who I am and an identity. And to me, that's a feel bad. So when I work with clients and even with myself, I prefer to refer to everything as an event or an experience. That way we're not owning it as who we are. It's something that we went through.
I love that. And I love that. And I think if you listen back, like just when you were saying that, for anybody who catches the replay, or even like if you're watching this again or something, I think even if you would like rewind a little bit and just listen to the vibration of those words, Because when you say I'm a victim, or when you say I'm a survivor, there is that negative energy to it. But when you say I experienced and I'm empowered, those words change. I mean, the vibration of it changes.
And it changes your emotional response,
Mm-hmm.
which, you know, energy and motion, that's your vibration. But, you know, I want people to witness, like, I'm not unemotional in talking about these experiences because I'm disassociated or detached or suppressing. Like, I'm able to sit here and talk about everything because it's not a wound that has pain in it anymore.
Right.
You know, and the process that I'm sharing is what got me to this point, and it is because of not having it be a part of me and not being a part of who I am.
Right.
And when I rewrote my story, part of what I did was do something that I call positive disassociation, which is where you ask yourself, who would I be if this event had never happened?
Mm-hmm.
So you can try to get an outside point of view of who you are. And then it also forces you to step back and realize that who you are isn't what happened.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, and I think it is. Life is all about experience, and it's about what you can learn from it, what you take from it. So anybody can have any experience, and you can either be the victim or you can be the empowered person that came out of it.
Right.
So it's totally up to you. I agree with that.
And, you know, experiencing the negative emotions is normal, and it, because you're in it in the healing process, doesn't mean that you're victimizing yourself either.
Right. Oh, yes. That's such a great point, because I think people don't
Yeah.
want to feel the feelings because they're like, no, I don't want to feel this because it's too yucky and I don't want to feel that. But if you don't really tell yourself or allow yourself to have the truth of the feelings that you're having, and if you don't
Yeah.
allow yourself to have them, you're just repressing them. It's
Right.
different to process and repress.
Exactly. And I just want to make that distinction because I hear a lot of time people, like, there's a lot of conversation out there on the internet where they're like, oh, don't be a victim, don't be a victim. And you have to feel the emotions, and you're not being a victim by
Right. Totally
processing or
separate
feeling
things.
through them.
Yeah.
Totally different.
Totally separate.
So don't feel bad about yourself. So we kind of touched on the third point, which is what we've been talking about, like transforming your challenging emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But so when you feel them, and so when you allow your self to go in the space of acknowledging what's going on, again, to me, I write it down, or you can talk to someone else, or you can record yourself. And every point where you feel a lot of pain,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's important for people to notice where it shows up in their body. Like for
Mm-hmm.
me, when something's really hard, like my throat closes, you know, and I get really tearful, and that's how I can see that there's a lot of heavy emotion attached to it. And those are the points that we really look at, and we ask ourselves, you know, if I changed what I thought about this, how would that change the emotion? And so if you don't have to go drastic, like you don't have to be exhilarated that it happened,
Right.
but
Right.
you can ask yourself things like, how could I feel at peace with this situation? You know, what would I need to do to, you know, feel more empowered? Or, you know, just take the emotion that you're feeling and ask yourself what you would rather feel. And then you're going to have to explore within yourself that gap and answer the question for yourself of what you need to get from that point to the new point.
Right.
And,
I have
you
a
know, some
fly.
things,
I was like, what is that? It's a fly. Sorry.
some things we can work through on our own. But I would say, you know, if you find yourself really getting stuck in that process, then it really is important to get support, because what can happen is when we are overwhelmed by those emotions or that energy, it can be impossible for us to step outside of ourselves to get those answers that we need or to see a different perspective. So if a person finds themselves in that place, like, that's normal too, and that's just a sign that you need to go and get some outside support to help you navigate that emotion instead of getting stuck within it. And whether that's a coach or a counselor,
whatever you know.
whatever
Yeah.
it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Yeah.
Don't let yourself stay stuck because you think that you should be able to move through it on your own, when in fact, it's just not reality that we can handle everything on our own, and we really do need that outside support sometimes.
Right. No, I agree with that. Well, and I think there's different levels too, right? Like just like we were talking about earlier with the level of trauma. Sometimes I think I know there's this whole thing about don't vent, but I feel like venting sometimes is important. Sometimes you just need to call a girlfriend and be like, blah, and this is what happened. And then you're like, okay, I feel so much better. Like, how can I rethink this? Because a lot of, like, I have a couple of my best girlfriends and I'm like, okay, this is the shit that's going on in my head. Like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, help me see different perspective on this. And then all it takes maybe is them saying, well, what if you look at it like this? And you're like, okay, there it is. I feel so much better. Right. And then sometimes there's something that's deeper that you really got to dig at, and you've got to get to the bottom of it and really, dig out the trauma, right? Because sometimes we don't, like in my situation, like I didn't even realize how much I was holding on to from my daughter being in the hospital. Like I didn't realize how much I'd actually shoved down just to barrel through and go through it, which again, I know that's what I needed to do in that time. You know what I mean? Like I know that I was doing what I needed to do. And you and I talked about this before when we were deciding to do this call. And then there's the other things where it's a actual trauma where you're in it right now and you've got to be like, what am I even going to do to even get myself out of this? And then once you make like for you, it was going to, actually press charges. Like that was your first step of getting out of it. Right. And then the healing came after that.
Yeah. I mean, in any situation, first you have to just be in the situation and
right.
deal with
Yeah.
what is and what comes up.
Right.
Like you can't heal in the middle of
no
the event
you've got to
itself.
be
Like
in
no
it.
matter
Yeah.
what it is, you have to be in it.
Yeah.
And you said something that it just like escaped. Sorry, it just escaped me that I wanted to tail on. So I don't know what
it'll come back if it's important.
It flew away. It was here and then flew away.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So do you have like I said, I know this kind of got all mixed up and it's not quite the webinar we were planning on doing, but do you have any other points you want to go over, or like how do people reach out to work with you? Or I haven't really seen very many questions other than, oh, how cool, my cousin from Italy is on right now.
Oh, wow.
How fun.
Hi.
And then somebody says, thank you for having this dialogue. It's so important. Yes. Suppression blocks the healing process. I agree with that. So if it's unbalanced, it's trauma. I agree with that too. Like it could be simply being unbalanced can create trauma. So all of those things are absolutely true and valid. So I guess if you have anything to kind of wrap up, and then hopefully we'll have another conversation about this someday when we're not like fighting technology and nothing's going the way it's supposed to.
I think the physical point is really what I'd like to touch on, and just really remind people that it really is a physical response, and trauma and stress really does change how our physical body responds and even how we think in our brain. It rewires our brain and our body to that state.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter the size of it, we need to keep that in mind. And one thing that I used to do, I wanted to touch on reprogramming your body. And I have an audio download that people can have for free to help with this.
Awesome.
We'll drop the link, but it's at livewellbewelldogood.com/amplify.
Okay.
So I practice what I called later positive disassociation and healing. So I had a lot of physical, emotional, mental responses to past trauma. And I'll be honest, I still do about some certain things,
I think that's brilliant that you say that, like, because that's the thing is this is life. So it's never a one and done. Like no. I tell people that all the time. It's never a one and done. It's constant.
No. It's layered, and it's never ending, because life was always going to bring new things. And the better we learn how to move through them, the better we can handle the next one. But
I love this comment. It says the body always holds the score. Man, isn't that true? I love that comment.
It does.
And then
So going
sorry.
back, like with her comment and the physical part, like animals work on releasing their trauma. Like ducks and geese, I've read, like after they get into a fight, they flap their wings to release the energy, or like animals will shake.
Mm-hmm.
But as humans, we tend to
We tighten it
repress,
up. Yeah.
we tighten it
Yeah.
up.
Suck it up.
And so letting it go, whether it's through, you know, talking, like you were talking about earlier, that's a method of releasing the energy and expressing it out of you. Or getting physical and like dancing or running as fast as you can. Or, you know, when I used to find myself actually disassociating, I found that if I just got up and did a ton of push-ups or a ton of jumping jacks, anything to get in my body instead of getting out lost in the mind state, you know, it would help move the energy through. And then, you know, I think when people have a safe space,
Sorry, there's a fly. I'm like, really? It's freezing. It's literally snowing outside my window, and there's one fly in my house that's driving me crazy.
Well, you're saving its life, so
Right? It kind of goes
but
with how the day's gone, right? With the technology not working, and now there's a fly in here, whatever. It's all real.
that's real life.
Yeah.
But to like release it in your body, talking about it holding score and that tightness we hold on to, and just we're really our nervous system and our bodies are physically trying to armor us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I used to lay down like in my bedroom and I'd be having like all these experiences in my head and emotions of the past. And so, you know, I would, to deal with the things in the present, we have to feel them like we talked about. So I would sit in a safe space, which was my room, and I would close the door and I would tell myself, right here and right now, none of this is happening. And then I would just lay on the floor and comfort myself and tell myself over and over and over that I am in a safe space. Nothing is going to happen to me. I'm in a safe space. Nothing. And I would just focus on letting my body relax.
Mm-hmm.
And in time,
being in the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I did what I call reprogramming my body that way. Like, so when I would feel that stress coming up, I would lay down and I would let it pass, and then I would put it in relaxation. You know, and one thing I did is put one hand on my heart and one on my belly, which helps trigger the relaxation response in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, and yeah, saying I agree, like whatever works for you is going to be the best way.
My go-to is like deep breathing. Because there's some breathing techniques that you can do that physically create a response to the nerves in the back of your throat. Like if you do the ocean breath in yoga, like that creates this vibration in the back of your throat where it will calm your nervous system down. So I know we're kind of going up on time, and I have to get going because I do have to go. I'm speaking tonight in Minot. So I need to get ready to wrap it up. I think there's two really good points that I want to reiterate. First, I want to go back to my venting, because I feel like there's a difference in venting and just spilling and having somebody complain with you versus venting and having somebody give you a good way to reframe. So be really careful about that. Like when you're venting to a friend, you don't want to call somebody who's just going to turn around and complain with you and make it worse.
No.
You want to do that venting to somebody and say, this is exactly how I'm feeling right now, so that you're being true and authentic with what you're feeling, but they're going to help you say, okay, well, what if you look at it this way? Or what if we did this? Or what, giving you options instead of just complaining with you. I think there's two different ways. So that I want to make very clear before we get off the call. And then the other thing that I think was brilliant, what you were talking about, and this is physically how our body works. So I did a class years and years ago with Dr. Stephen Horn. He's a naturopath, and I think he's got some like actual medical degrees too, but I don't know exactly what he has, but phenomenal class. And he was doing a class on flower essences, and he was talking about how they work with the energetic system. And so everything is energy, we're energy. And exactly what you said about the animals. And I think this is why the trauma gets trapped in us. He was talking about the flight, fight, or freeze, which is kind of what you alluded to. And what happens is like a rabbit getting chased by a coyote is going to run really fast. It's going to pump adrenaline. It's going to have all this adrenaline. And then when it gets away from the coyote, it's going to shake and shake and shake until the adrenaline settles. Now we don't do that as humans. We like get in that state like this, and then we never really come down from it because we don't have the capacity to really shake it off. So there's something valuable in saying, shake it off, right?
Yeah.
And we don't do that. And so that's when it gets trapped. And I think that's why it's so valuable what you're talking about today and sharing your story, saying, don't hold on to this trauma, like turn it into triumph, right? Turn it into empowerment. So I really appreciate everything you're saying today, everything you shared with us. And it's really valuable. Like, we need to have more conversations like this so that people know that they can be real and be authentic and be in whatever they're in.
And that you can move past it. Like, you can be in it, you can move past it. And
don't stay there.
Your experiences don't have to become who you are and affect you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
She's saying, thank you for having the strength and vulnerability to have this conversation. So you're welcome. We appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this. We scheduled this way back in the spring, didn't we?
January.
Yeah, like way back. Yeah. So it's been a long time since we've had this planned, and it's just been such a crazy busy year. But anyway, thank you so much. Let's make sure we get all the links. I will download the video as well so that I can get it onto YouTube, and we'll have all of the links of how to get a hold of Morgan there. I'm sure you have a Facebook page and a website, so we'll put all of that in the comments. We'll share it in the Facebook event as well, because it was set up as an event, and then anybody that registered on Eventbrite, I'll check and make sure that we did get that. And I apologize for all of the delays and the technical issues and everything else we had going on to get this going this morning. And we'll talk to everybody else soon. Morgan, do you have anything you want to close with?
Just, thank you to everyone that showed up today, and thank you for your patience and for showing up for yourself, because there was something here that you wanted to get out of it, and I hope that you did. And I will, drop the links in the comments. And thank you, Jennifer, for having me, and let's hopefully continue this again.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for today, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Bye.